Okay, what's up, guys? Josh Brunt here. Good to be here. Um, so we are into habit one right now. About three sections in. Super awesome. Habit one is like, okay, the preface is like pretty much the foundation of this book, but habit one is also like a very, very high foundational concept. Like all the other habits are based on habit one. You have to have habit one if you're going to do the other habits. So we've already talked about the social mirror and between stimulus and response. And so we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about this idea of between stimulus and response lies our freedom to choose. And so this section is called Proactivity Defined. Really cool section. So we're going to dive deeper into what does the word proactivity mean? What does it mean to be a proactive person? What does that like entail? Right? So kind of going back to Viktor Frankl and his story in the Nazi death camps and how he chose to respond in a way that was different than what most people would have responded like. And so that was like really cool to be able to see that from him. But what's even more cool though is this whole idea of how in going through this very difficult task, Viktor Frankl, he came up with an accurate self map. So like he had grown up and had studied Freudian psychology in this idea of determinism and how your conditions and life experiences determine who you are, your character, your personality, and your responses to stimuli, right? But as he develops an accurate map of the true nature of man, as he comes to fully understand the power that we're capable of doing, he begins to develop from that paradigm of himself and the true nature of man. He develops the self paradigm of the true nature of man, which leads him to discover the first and most basic habit of any like effective person ever, which is the habit of proactivity. So he like develops this idea of proactivity as he's looking through this new lens of this idea of the true nature of man, which essentially is we are proactive by nature. So let's go kind of dive into like what that actually means. So proactivity essentially means taking responsibility for our own lives. The book Extreme Ownership goes over this a lot, actually, with Leif Babins and Jocko Willink. Amazing book, too. Maybe we'll do a podcast on that, too. But he says that taking responsibility for your life, right, is a major part of being proactive, and how like our behavior it's a function of our choices and our decisions, not our conditionings. So like we have this unique ability to Covey uses the word subordinate. So we can subordinate feelings to values. Or like if you're in the rush of the moment or the busyness of the day or someone insults you or you're in a Nazi death camp. You have lots of pent up feelings and emotions inside of you. What he's saying is that we can subordinate feelings to values, or that we can make our decision making process based on values instead of on feelings. So let's say that you value service or kindness, right? And someone punches you and you get this rage inside of you to punch them back. Well, that's a feeling. And even though it's there and it can definitely influence you to punch them back, that doesn't determine it. You don't have to actually do that. You can choose to turn the other cheek and show forth kindness and love. You can. It's possible. You have that power within you. We can subordinate these feelings to our innermost values. The cool thing about values is that they're also like pre-chosen and pre-selected and carefully thought out. Your values should be things that you're very much aware of, like, for example, kindness and charity or integrity or family, right? Like these things should be very, very, very thought out and like what you value in life. Now, what he's saying there then is that we have the initiative and the responsibility to make things happen. So kind of from my point of view, the two ends to proactivity. First one is taking responsibility for our lives. That our life is the way it is because of the choices that we have made, and not a function of our conditions, conditioning, or experiences. And on the other hand, we have this ability to be initiative and to make things happen, to be proactive, to start things, to not wait until things happen to us, but rather happen to those things. So this is like a really cool insight he uses, which is called, he looks at the word responsibility, which if you break it apart, it's response ability, or our ability to respond, right? So we can choose our response. We have this ability to choose that response. And so a very highly proactive person will not blame external circumstances, conditions, or conditioning, but rather their behaviors and thoughts and paradigms and attitudes are a direct product of their own conscious choice, a direct posterity of their choice based on values rather than feelings. So he says that that's essentially a proactive person, and that if we choose, if we do make choices, let me back up. We as human beings are proactive. We are. That's our nature, is we're proactive beings. So if we live a life making decisions based on feelings or conditions or conditioning or experiences or external factors, essentially we are choosing to empower those things to control us. So if someone hits me and I hit them back, I chose to let that punch affect me and to control me, to hit them back. That was my conscious choice. And in making such a choice like that, I become reactive. So that's the definition of reactivity, is when you proactively choose to act based on feelings instead of on values, which we should value principles because they're always enduring and never ending, and they're self-evident. They're eternal. But reactive people are often affected by their physical environment. For instance, if the weather is good, if it's looking amazing, then they feel amazing. But if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's windy, if it's a storm, then those people feel sad. And that can also be the same case in social experiences or rooms, right? Or if a friendship is good, if someone treats me well, then I feel happy. But if someone treats me poorly, then I feel sad. It's that person is controlling how I feel based on their actions or even their opinions. That's a big one too. And so a proactive person doesn't actually care what someone does to them or thinks about them. They just say I'm cool with who I am. I have this ability to respond, and I choose not let that affect me. You may use that information to better your own life and to maybe even help that person out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to let that person influence your emotions and control how you feel, right? And so a proactive person carries their own weather with them. They carry their own feelings with them. Siri's up right now. And so whether it's rainy or shiny, doesn't matter to them. It makes no difference. Whether someone treats them well or someone treats them poorly, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They're going to feel the way they choose to feel. So that's really, really cool. Another cool thing with that is that reactive people build their emotional lives around the behavior of others. So kind of like I was saying, that they will feel the way that other people treat them, which also is saying that they will empower the weaknesses of other people to control them. That's an interesting concept there, where like someone else's weakness in having a lack in patience or understanding or a lack of loyalty or anything, or like a lack of kindness, anything like that is like a weakness, and that we empower that weakness as we become reactive, as we choose to let those weaknesses control us. And so kind of combining everything that we've said is that the essence of a proactive person is this ability, awareness, capacity to subordinate an impulse to a value. So like something that pops up in the spur of the moment, we can control that, become aware of it, and then subordinate that to a long-term value, which is actually like motivating and is in line with the character that we want to be like. So like I said, our values should be already thought out, already selected, so that when these impulses come up, we have that backdrop to fall back onto. Okay. So that doesn't necessarily mean to say like we're not going to be influenced by that stimuli, whether it be like physical or social or psychological. Like it doesn't actually matter, but like a response to those stimuli is going to be a value-based response instead of like an impulse-based response or a feelings-based response, spur of the moment emotions. Eleanor Roosevelt says, "No one can hurt you without your consent." So we have to empower other people's actions in order for it to actually like affect us. In the words of Gandhi, "They cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them." Kind of cool that like we can always have self-respect for ourselves, for our inner dignity and character, and that no one can actually take that away from me. No one can make me feel less about myself, right? Stephen Covey says here, "It is our willing permission, our consent to what happens to us that hurts us far more than what happens to us in the first place." So essentially, like if we want to become really effective in life, if we can just control our responses to any sort of stimuli, we can actually increase our effectiveness dramatically, because that's what actually like changes our character, is like how we respond to things, not actually what happens to us, but how we respond to those things will have a greater impact on our life than the things that are actually happening to us in the first place. Now, this whole idea of proactivity, like choosing your emotions and your responses, it can actually be like very hard to understand or buy in, or to even like think it's possible. And like honestly, if you guys think I'm crazy, like I choose to respond in a way like to say like, cool, like I respect your decision to think that, but like I know I'm right because this follows principles. Like I know that the true nature of man is capable of doing that. I've seen it in my own life many times, in knocking doors, in like recruiting and dating and family life, and like everyday life. Honestly, taking ice baths, like it's all the same stuff. One of my favorite lines in this section is Stephen Covey says this. It's so good. He says, "Until a person can say deeply and honestly, 'I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday,' that person cannot say, 'I choose otherwise.'" I'm going to repeat that. That's very, very important. I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday. So until a person says that, that person cannot say, "I choose otherwise." Until a person is aware of the fact that their present situation, their present conditions, life is the way it is because of the choices that they made. Until a person can honestly and deeply say that within themselves, that person cannot say, "I choose a different life. I choose otherwise." The more that we blame external factors, conditions, and resources, the more we limit ourselves, the more that we confine ourselves into this prison where we can't make any progress. If we just accept who we are, that our true nature is proactivity, and that we are who we are because of our choices, we can create and organize and make so much more than we normally would be able to. He tells this story about this lady who, so like Stephen Covey's talking about all this stuff in this seminar about proactivity and stuff, and this lady pops up and she says she starts in the middle of the presentation, in the middle of the audience, pops up and starts talking very excitedly, and she realizes that she's kind of being weird in this audience, and she sits back down but keeps talking to her neighbors. It's this revolutionary idea in her mind, and afterwards Stephen Covey goes up to talk to her because he's very interested in what she was saying. And she said that she was a nurse to a very ungrateful and miserable man, and she said nothing I can do for him is good enough. No matter what I do, he's always ungrateful, insults me, criticizes me, never expresses appreciation, zero kindness, and it's the worst. All of us nurses hate him, and we pray for his demise, and he passes away, right? And she said, and for me to hear you say that it was I'm feeling the way I am because of my choice, not because of what he's doing, was utter bullcrap. There's no way that that's the case. And then she said, but as I started pondering on it more and really thinking deeply, she says, I went really inside myself and began to ask, do I have the power to choose my response? Now, this is cool. She says, when I finally realized that I do have that power, when I swallowed that bitter pill and realized that I had chosen to be miserable, I also realized that I could choose not to be miserable. It's a really cool insight. When I swallowed the bitter pill, so she starts pondering, realizes that she actually does have a very proactive nature, that she can choose her response, and that she swallowed the bitter pill. It's not easy to accept this. It's actually pretty hard, because what you're saying, in effect, is that I have this problem in my life, and it's a result of choices that I've made in the past, which may or may not have been ineffective or wrong choices. And so admitting that is really hard for us to do, and to do that inner reflection and self-analysis and introspection. But it's true. And so she says that she's free, she's out of prison, that she's no longer going to be controlled by that person. So again, just reiterating this part where it's not what happens to us that controls our life, but it's how we respond to what happens to us. It's our response. And yeah, sure, we can be hurt by another person's car wreck, or someone could punch us or take our money, right? But our inner character, our inner basic identity, our inner paradigm of who we are cannot be changed by those things. Cannot be changed by someone hitting me with a car. Them hitting me does not change the fact that I'm still the son of God, that I'm still confident in who I am, that I'm still male, right? And so it doesn't change that. And so he says that it's often our most difficult experiences that become these crucibles, or these experiences that forge our character and develop our internal powers. In the hardest moments is when we develop this freedom. It's when we expand this space between stimulus and response. So we enlarge our proactivity, which is that space. To choose our response, to subordinate a value to a feeling or an impulse to subordinate a feeling to a value or an impulse to a value. And that allows us to work better in future environments, plus inspire others to do the same. So there's that, and it's really cool to see people do that. To see people go through these very hard things in their lives and choose correct responses, and to choose responses full of integrity and loyalty and passion and energy. If someone's on their deathbed, right, and they are trying to write out their last wishes and fighting through this pain to get through this pain in order to express a message to their children. It's like very inspiring. Or like writing your own autobiography, right? Just like this whole idea of inspiration, where people like inspiring stories. They're inspiring because of the fact that they had to go through all this work to like get to where they were. But not only that, like with all of these downward pressures in their life from like the enemy, or like a better team, or the hatred from other people, like Gandhi, right? Or like MLK, like just massive amounts of opposition, but they stuck to their values. They didn't give in to the enemy's way of thinking, or even of their values, right? But they like stuck to their values despite all this opposition. And that's like really cool. Like for example, like Forever Strong, right? In that movie, I forget the character's name, but he like learns his values as he spends time with this rugby team, and then as he like fights back with, or as he plays his opposing team, he like doesn't sink back down to their level. He like stays where he's at, and that's like super inspiring for people to like, even in the midst of adversity and opposition, to stick it out and to stick to their values. It's like super cool and inspiring to be able to do that. And that creates a tremendous amount of like intrinsic worth of like character and contribution, like service, of love, concern, appreciation, all that stuff. Last thing I wanted to talk about here is Viktor Frankl and Stephen Covey talk about this idea of three central values in life. There's the experiential, the creative, and the attitudinal. So the experiential is what happens to us. It's like getting hit by a car or getting punched, right? Or like even like the sun on our faces. All these things are happening to us. The creative value suggests that we bring it into existence. So for example, like building a house. Like we organized material and then brought that into existence, right? And then there's attitudinal, which is essentially how we respond to what matters most in life, or to what we experience in life. And Stephen Covey says that that's like the highest of these three values, is this attitudinal value of choosing our attitudes in response to difficult circumstances, which may be like a terminal illness, maybe like loss of a job, you missed the train, like whatever it is, responding to difficult circumstances. And that as we respond well to these difficult circumstances, our paradigm shifts often change. Very, very hard experiences often shift our paradigms very effectively until we see new frames of reference about ourselves, the world, and others in it. And also like what life is even asking of us. Like when we go through a really hard time, sometimes we actually learn what like our unique mission in life. We learn the one thing that if we don't do, nobody will. And we're able to act on that because of the hard experiences that we have gone through. Like it happens all over the place. And so our perspective increases. And like then when someone acts on that, it actually lifts us all up and creates that experience that we all love. And so that's like proactivity, subordinating impulses to values, taking responsibility for our lives, taking initiative, making things happen, and choosing our response to any external stimuli. Recognizing that we are proactive by nature, that is our nature, is to be proactive, and that we choose what empowers us. And so are we going to choose things that like external things to empower us, or are we going to choose internal sources to empower us? Something to think about, but that's Proactivity Defined, and conking out. Thanks, guys.